Welcome back to Study Tips for IGCSE Biology. Today's topic is related to reproduction in plants. Without further delay, let's begin. In this chapter, you will find out about the differences between asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction, the structure and functions of the plant of a flower, pollination and fertilization in flowers, conditions that affect germination of seed. Asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction meaning is reproduction of new organism from a single parent without the involvement of sex cells. In other words, a reproduction that does not involve the fusion gametes of change in the number of chromosomes. Conceptually, in reproduction, each new organism obtains a set of chromosomes from its parent. Chromosomes are long threads of DNA found in the nucleus of a cell that contain sets of instructions called genes. Asexual reproduction involves just one parent. Example, asexual reproduction can quickly and efficiently produce many new plants, all genetically identical to one another. In this case, we take potato. Potato reproduce using stem tubers. Some of plants stem grow normally, producing leaf and do photosynthesis. Other stem grow under the soil, swelling called tubers form of them. So sucrose is transported from the leaf into these underground stem tubers where it is converted into starch and stored. The tubers grow larger and larger, and each plant can produce many stem tubers. Sexual production. Sexual production meaning the production of new organism by the combination of genetic information of two individuals of different sexes. In other words, sexual production is a process involving the fusion of the nuclei of two gametes to form a zygote and the production of offspring that are genetically different from each other. In sexual reproduction, the parent organism produces sex cells called gametes. Egg and sperm are examples of gamete. Two of these gametes join and their nuclei fuse together, and this is called fertilization. The new cell which is formed fertilization is called zygote. The zygote divides again and again and eventually grows into a new organism. Zygote contains chromosomes from both its parents. It can have any combination of their genes. If you can see from this diagram, humans have 46 chromosomes in each of their body cells. Male body cells have 46 chromosomes and female body cells have 46 chromosomes. And the cell in each human body each contains 46 chromosomes. When gametes are being made, cells divide in different ways is called meiosis. And then in sexual reproduction, cells in testes, which is male's gamete, sperm, and ovaries, which consists of 23 eggs, divide by meiosis, producing gametes with half the number of chromosomes. If you can see, human eggs and sperm cells only have 23 chromosomes each. And then the next step, when they fuse together at fertilization, 23 males gamete sperm and eggs, ovaries, they become a zygote. The zygote have a total number of 46 chromosomes. So to simplify, When the male and female gametes join together, a zygote is formed, which has the full number of chromosomes. This is the process of sexual reproduction. Male gametes and female gametes. From this diagram, fertilization flowers, you can see in the flowering plants, the male gamete is found inside pollen grain. And then male gamete does not move by itself, but is carried to the female gamete by a pollen tube. You can see from here, the male gamete is almost touched the wall of ovary. From this diagram, the flower diagram, a generalized flower, many flowering plants are hermaphrodites, meaning plants make both male and female gametes. The function of flower is to make gametes and to ensure fertilization takes place. And the diagram above illustrates the structure of an insect pollinated flower. Sexual reproduction in flowering plant. If you can see, the example given here is euchry flower. Euchryphia flower. Euchryphia plant is an example of hermaphroditic, which make both male and female gametes. On the outside of flowers are the sepals. The sepal protect the flower while it is in bud. Sepals normally green. Inside the sepals are the petals, brightly colored, which attract insects to the flower. The petals of some flowers have lines running from top to bottom. These lines are called guide lines because they guide insect to the base of the petal. Here is the gland called nectary. Nectary makes sugar liquid called nectar, which insects feed on. Inside petals are stamens, so these are male part of the flower. Each stamen made up of long filament with an anther at the top. The anther contain pollen grain, contain male gametes. Couple. The female parts of the flower is in the center is a couple, consists one or more couples. Couples contain ovary. Inside ovary is ovule, contain female gametes. Top of ovary is a style with a stigma at the tip. So the function of stigma is to catch pollen grain. Pollen grain and ovules. The male gametes are inside pollen grain, which are made in anthers. Actually, this diagram is to illustrate a young anthers before flower buds open. If you can see, diagram A is actually young anthers before flower buds open. It consists of line along which the another will split. So this is the anther. So beside the anther, beside the line, okay, there will be a line. Okay, this is the filament. Whereas diagram B is anther has 4 spaces of pollen sacs inside it. Pollen sacs which is containing developing of pollen grain. Okay, and the diagram C is actually mature pollen grains. When the flower buds open, anthers split open. And pollen is on the outside of the anthers. This is to show the diagram C is actually a matured flower anthers. Pollen grains and ovules. Pollens look like a fine powder. It is often yellow. Pollen grain from different kinds of flower have different shape. Each grain is surrounded by a hard coat so it can survive in difficult conditions. The coat protects the male gametes that are inside the grain as the pollen is carried from one flower to another. The female gametes are inside the ovule in the ovary. They have been made by meiosis. Each ovule contains a nucleus. Fertilization happens when a pollen grain nucleus with an ovule nucleus. This is a diagram of pollen grain from a daisy flower sticking to the surface of a petal. So the electron micrograph is magnified about times 800. This is how the pollen grain look like from a daisy flowers. Let's look into under topic pollination. Pollination by definition is the transfer of pollen grain from male part of the plant, anther of stamen, to the female part of the plant, stigma. For fertilization to take place, there is several stages. First stage is the male gamete must travel to the female gametes. Second stage, pollination takes place, whereby the process of transfer of pollen grain from male part of the plant, anther of stamen, to female part of the plant, which is stigma. Pollination is often carried out by insects. Insects such as honeybee come to the flower attracted by their colors and strong sweet scent. The bee follows the guideline to nectaris, brushing past the anthers as it goes. So some of the pollen sticks to its body. And the third stage, the bee then goes to another flowers looking for more nectar. Some of the pollen it picks up at the first flower stick onto the stigma of the second flower when the bee brushes past it. The stigma is sticky and many pollen grains get stuck on it. If the second flower is from the same species of the plant as the first, pollination has taken place. If you can see from the left, is where the bees is on top of the flowers. The bees has come to the flower to collect nectar. Pollen gets stuck to its body and the bees will then carry this to the next flower its visit. The differences between self and the cross-pollination. Self-pollination means that is the transfer of pollen grain from the anther of the flower to the stigma of the same flower or a different flower on the same plant. Whereas cross-pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther of flower to the stigma of a flower on a different plant of the same species. This is the example of the cross pollen, which is put under microscope, magnified times 35,000. And this is a diagram, the process of wind pollinated flowers. So if you can see, there is a large feathery stigma hanging outside the flowers and anthers dangling outside the flowers. Okay. Insect pollinated and wind pollinated flowers. Insect pollinated, they have large conspicuous petals, often with guidelines, often strongly scented, often have nectaris at the base of petal, enters inside flowers where insect has to brush past them to reach the nectar, stigma inside flowers where insect has to brush past it to reach nectar. They have sticky or spiky pollen grain which stick to insects, and quite large quantity of pollen made because some will be eaten or will be delivered to the wrong kind of flowers. If a type of wind pollinated, small inconspicuous petal or no petal at all, no scent, no nectaris, anthers dangling outside the flowers, where they catch the wind. As you can see from the example from the previous slide, stigma large and feathery and dangling outside the flower, where pollen is in the air may land on it. Smooth, light pollen which can be blown in the wind, and a very large quantity of pollen made because most will be blown away and lost. Fertilization. After pollination, the male gamete inside the pollen grain on the stigma still has not reached the female gamete. The female gamete is inside the ovule and the ovule is inside ovary. It has landed on the right kind of stigma and then the pollen grain begins to grow a tube. If you can see, the ovule is surrounded by several layers of cell called integuments. At one end, there is a small hole in the integuments called micropyle. Okay, and then the pollen tube grow through the micropyle into the oval. The pollen tube grow down through the style and the ovary towards the oval. So pollen tube beginning to grow. So it secretes enzyme to digest a pathway through the style. Okay, this diagram, it shows about the pollen nucleus male gamete travel along the pollen tube into oval. It fuses with oval nucleus female gamete and fertilization takes place. When it touches this wall of ovary, it touches this micropyle. And one pollen grain can only fertilize only one ovule. If many ovule in ovary, then many pollen grains will be needed to fertilize them all. Seeds. One ovule has been fertilized, many parts of the flowers are not needed anymore. The sepal, petals, and stamen have done their job. They wither and fall off. Inside ovary, the ovules start to grow. Each ovule now contains zygote, which was formed at fertilization. The zygote divides by mitosis to form embryo plant. The ovule now called seeds. The integuments of ovule become hard and dry to form testa of seed. Water is withdrawn from seed and becomes dormant. If you can see the embryo consists of radicle which grow into root and plumule which grow into shoot. The seed also contain food for the embryo. In bean seed, the food is stored in two cream-colored cotyledons. This cotyledon contains starch and protein, and also enzyme. Surrounding cotyledon is starch protective covering called testa. Okay. Testa, the function is to stop embryo from being damaged and prevent bacteria and fungi from entering the seed. It has tiny hole in it, micropyle. When seed separated from plant near micropyle, there is a scar, the hilum. You can see like this, like a scar. So where the seed was joined to the pod ovary, grown ovary called fruits. Seed germination. The factors that affect seed germination as below. From the external factors, one is water. Germination cannot occur unless and until the seed is provided with an external supply of water. Water is absorbed by a dry seed through the micropyle and the seed coat. Water performs a number of functions during the germination of seed. One is soften seed coat and make it permeable. Increased permeability allows better gaseous exchange. Water activates the protoplasm of the seed cells. Insoluble food materials get solubilized in the presence of water, which then diffuses from the storage region to the embryo axis. Several enzymes which are essential for growth and germination develop only in the presence of water. Second is oxygen. Why? External factors, oxygen might affect seed germination because aeration of the soil is absolutely necessary for the germination of the seed because oxygen is necessary for the aerobic respiration by which the seed get the requisite energy from the growth of the embryo. And the third is temperature. Seed normally germinate within a wide temperature range. However, freshly harvested seed of several plants germinate only within a narrow temperature range, which widen only when after ripening have taken place. And factors number 4 is light. Plants differ as to the effect of light on their germination. Seed of many plants are light indifferent or non-photoblastic. They are not influenced in their germination by the presence or absence of light. Most of our important crops plants belong to this category. The seeds which are affected by lights are described as photoblastic. Another factors is internal factors. Internal factors is vitality, the ability of the seed to germinate when provided with optimum condition is described as vitality of a seed. It is dependent upon its stock, food, size, health, and etc. And number 2 is viability. With the passage of time, a seed loses its power to germinate. So thus, each seed have longevity of a period within which it can show renewal of growth or germination. So most of the crop plants lose their viability within 2 to 5 years. And sexual and asexual reproductions. Many plants can produce in two ways, asexually and sexually. Which is better? So, in your opinion, which one is better? Okay, let's look. What the criteria do they have? Asexual reproduction, some of parent cells divide by mitosis. This makes new cells genetically identical to parent cells. They are cloned. And then asexual reproduction does not produce genetic variation. Asexual reproduction also, single organism can reproduce on its own. It does not need to wait to be pollinated or to find mate. Perhaps there is only a single one growing in an isolated place. And for asexual reproduction, please do remember, though that even a single plant may be able to reproduce sexually by using self-pollinated. On the other hand, sexual reproduction, some of parent cells divide by mitosis. The new cells that are made are called gametes. They have only half as many chromosomes as the parent cell. Secondly, when two sets of chromosomes in two gametes combine at fertilization, a new combination of genes is produced. And on top of that, sexual reproduction also produces offspring genetically different from their parents. So, from your point of view, which one is better? Asexual reproduction or sexual reproduction? Let's look what is the answer. Farmers and other commercial plants growers make use of these two possible methods of propagating their plants. With that being said, I hope you enjoy reading this topic. Hope to see you in this in next chapter. Thank you very much.